إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم بلغ رسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة وجاهد في الله حق جهاده يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله لا يغير ما لقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his wonderful book, the last messenger that delivered the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. And we see, have we asked ourselves, or have we tried to do something? For example, have you tried to learn a new language? Have you tried to do something that you've never done before? But maybe we weren't successful. You wanted to see a change happen in the ummah. You wanted to see a different result. But maybe it didn't happen according to our wishes and our desires. And that's what we'll talk about today as we enter a new era, 2026. I know it's not the Hijri calendar, but it is an opportunity to reflect. It's a time of reflection, and it is something we can use to make ourselves better. So many times I tried to learn something, and I'm going to share that experience with you today of why it didn't work for me, and then how I started to improve. And one example of that is learning Arabic. Learning Arabic is a very difficult language for a non-Arab. Especially one like many of us, we may not have the opportunity to go overseas. Or maybe you're trying to learn English because you want to get a good job. And they're asking you in an interview many difficult questions and you're not able to answer those questions. And that's a hurdle that's preventing you from getting to where you want to be. Either to understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to improve yourself in any language that you find yourself in. So there's three things that I found myself doing or not doing that were contributing to my success or my failure. And the first one was trying to change, but not changing on the inside. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا لِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give us that change many times on the outside until the change is made on the inside. And we live in a society that glamorizes showing what we're doing. That's the era, the gene, the generation, the time, the zaman that we live in, is that we want to show. But real change comes not from wanting to change because of improvement in status. I want to show you what I can do. I want to have a certain achievement that I can put on a shelf. I want to compete with others to show that I know more than you. These things are changes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept. He wants to do tazkiyah. He wants us to do tazkiyah of the nafs, to purify ourselves, to make a real change first on the inside. And once the spiritual change comes, we will see how it changes. Not to show others so we can put it on an Instagram feed, or make a TikTok video and show, look, this is the change that I made. Look at my change. Look at what I've become. That's not the change that we want to show. We want to have barakah and blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A true change. And we also have to know what is required of us to change. You know, there was a time, and many of these teachings that I will talk about today are from Imam Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin. There was a time which was very similar to the time that we live in now. Masjid al-Aqsa was conquered. And when it was conquered, 30,000 Musallin were slaughtered and killed at the time of conquer in Masjid al-Aqsa. The Muslim Ummah was completely divided. No two countries could work together. Sham was divided, Misr was divided, the Ummah was completely divided into small provinces. And then, at that time, the Crusaders said, this is the best time to attack the Ummah. Because they're weak, they're divided. And so one attack came, and another attack came, and another attack came. Every single attack that came, Muslims lost that attack. Even though they were greater in number, they had better technologies, they had better rules of law and medicine. They were much more advanced of a society, but they lost every single time that the Crusader army that they faced. So then a group of ulama came, and they said, we need to rectify the Ummah. Something is wrong, because on the outside, they're very strong. But what is happening? Why is it losing every time? And then a great generation of scholars came to fix the qulub of the amrad of the heart, the diseases of the heart. And it started with Imam Ghazali and many others that came after him. And so the first thing they emphasized was when we want to make a change, we have to change what's inside. When they looked at the Muslims, at their conditions, and that's the job of the ulama, to sit with the people and find out what is wrong with us. What is wrong in our hearts? What's the problem? And they found that many of the members of the Ummah had left Islam. They have hubb al-dunya, love of dunya in their hearts. And so that's why the intention is very important. The intention is going to lead us to success or failure. What is that intention? It's through a process of clarifying our heart. From going into the deep inside the heart and saying, I'm doing muhasabah. I'm taking account of myself. And Imam Ghazali has a 6-step formula in Ihya Ulumuddin, starting with listing why you're trying to do it and fighting with yourself to do it with ikhlas. Imam Ghazali was at the top of the Nizamiya school. They made him the head, the dean of the school. But he left it because he said there's something wrong in my heart. I'm doing this because of something else, not for Allah. I'm going to leave this post. I'm going to work on myself. And when I'm better, then maybe I can talk in front of people. And at this time, he wrote his famous books. These books were used by other ulama after his death. And by the way, look at the names that are happening too. When we look at our history and we look at our surroundings, they tell us about the signs of what's happening with the Ummah. Before Salahuddin came, they used to be called Dawla, Shamsuddin al-Dawla, meaning state in Arabic. Dawla is a state. Before Salahuddin came, when they started using these teachings of Imam Ghazali and his students, like Ibn al-Arabi, Qadir Jilani, all of these ulama, they said something is wrong. Imam Ghazali has given us the solution. So from Dawla, they started to change their name to Deen. Imad al-Din, Nur al-Din, al-Dinki. So they go from Dawla, state, which has no religious connotation, to Deen. Imad al-Din, Nur al-Din, Salah al-Din. That the emphasis is on the Deen. And when the emphasis was on the Deen, and the first step in the Reformation came, which is tazkiyah of the nafs, to make ourselves more pure, to make our intentions fi sabilillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even changed the names. And they went from Dawla to Deen until Salahuddin came and liberated Jerusalem. So the first step in this reformation for us, whether it's to learn something, to grow in this dunya, or to have something for the akhirah, is to have ikhlas in our niyyah, to change ourselves. The second step is to have consistency. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الْعَمَلِ أَدْوَمُهُ وَإِنْ قَالَ. Prophet ﷺ said that the best action may be small, but is consistent. And you know, we live in a time where this was a time when Prophet ﷺ told us that there will be very little barakah at the time. لَا تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ. There will be, wait for the hour حَتَّى يَتَقَارَبَ الزَّمَانِ. يَتَقَارَبَ الزَّمَانِ. That the time will pass very fast. You will have no barakah at the time. So we find having consistency very difficult in this time. You know, we ask somebody, okay, do this. I don't have time. I don't have time to do it. And one of the problems is, how do we achieve consistency at a time where there's not a lot of barakah in time? And one example just from myself, I'll give you. You know, I used to use Saturday mornings after I would pray Fajr, I would go play golf for like 4 hours. Because it takes a long time to play golf. You have to drive there, you play 18 holes, maybe you eat something. So, you know, from like 7 a.m. to almost 12, 1 a.m., I'm playing golf. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with golf. But what I'm saying is that I wanted to learn something. I wanted to grow in my Arabic studies. But that was the perfect time. Either I play golf or I study Arabic. I had no other time because I was not consistent enough. I could not devote enough time. Once I started studying Saturday, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened up other opportunities for me to study much more. And of course, Arabic is something you never learn. You just keep studying. You never understand it fully. Only the Prophet ﷺ and the Anbiya, they have the comprehensive grasp of Arabic, of the Arabic. Nobody else can do it because it's something divine from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you start noticing some changes. Why? Because you became consistent. We became consistent. And this applies to the Ummah too. If we want to see a change, we have to be consistent with what we do. If it's political engagement, we have to do it consistently. We can't just do it once in a while, haphazardly. It has to be done. That's why the Prophet ﷺ was the master of routines. He had the same routine every day. He would sleep, he would wake up, he would pray Fajr, he would do a Baylula, he would meet with this. He would have a very similar routine. He was very consistent in his routine. That's why he had the most impact. And through his sunnah we see that consistency is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the barakah. Before we're consistent, we just don't see it. You know, people try to learn Arabic, they try to learn a language, they spend 1 or 2 hours a week, they get frustrated because they don't gain anything. And a lot of it is, what is our intention? Are we consistent in this effort? And once we've achieved a sense of state of consistency, and we have analyzed our niyyah, then we start seeing a lot of changes. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people that are consistent, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us ikhlas in our actions. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين محمد النبي الأمي وآله وصحبه أجمعين. So the last thing, as we mentioned in our program of change, looking at the Tarikh al-Islam, the history of Islam, and the great scholars that came before us, like such as Imam Ghazali, and I know that there's some people that don't like Imam Ghazali, and there are some errors maybe that he's made in his book, but the ulama have studied it and fixed the errors. So you can read it that way. Anyway, so the first point is to have ikhlas, to have sincerity, to make an inner change first. A lot of times, you know, that's why it's dangerous for an alim to be an alim who doesn't do tazkiyat al-nafs. He becomes, or a person who becomes rich, a person who becomes famous, who becomes strong. What happens? What's going on in the world now? When we have power or fame and knowledge, and we don't have what's inside, it always leads to failure. And there's a book by a Harvard professor called The Success Syndrome, where they looked at people that were successful and they didn't do this muhasaba, the reckoning of themselves, and they all ended up failing in their life. after they had become successful. These were CEOs and millionaires and billionaires. So it's very important for us to have good niyyah, to be consistent, and the last thing, which is very important in our time, is not to be distracted, which is like lahu, distraction, which is doing something without any benefit for it. In today's age, we can scroll for hours on something and we just get sucked into it. That's called, it's a web, you know, the spider's web, ankabut. The spider's web, you get stuck on that web and it just drags you in. You look on one thing, oh, he likes cars. I'm going to keep sending him information about cars. And before you know it, you spend hours looking at cars. That's lahu. That is distraction. A person or an ummah that's distracted will always be defeated. We have to fight away the distractions for ourselves and for the ummah. Because this is from the jab. This is what they do. This is what it does. It completely distracts you from the deen and sucks your time out. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ وَالشَّمْسِ وَاللَّيْلِ وَالْفَجْرِ وَالضُّحَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us all of these time points to tell us that, look, your time is the most important quality and quantity and measurable thing that you have. Don't be distracted. A person that's distracted will never achieve their goals. They will not. An ummah that's distracted will not liberate Jerusalem. It will not happen. People have to get rid of it. I'm not saying we can be completely distraction-free with all of these things that we have. You know, social media, all of these tools that we never had before. Can we be completely not distracted? No, we cannot. But we have to treat this life that it's something we have to fight away the distractions. لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. That's what we're going to say at the end of our life. This was just a day, or part of a day. That's it. So we have to try our best to fight off distraction, to keep struggling. Otherwise, we'll just keep shopping. Right? We'll just keep shopping, we'll keep watching sports, we'll stop thinking. That's what a distraction person does. A distracted person doesn't think. There's no aql. And then what happens? When the aql leaves, he is susceptible to anything that can come upon it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people of these three characteristics. And I hope that all of us today, including myself, for 2026 will make that intention, to make the niyyah, to not be distracted, to have ikhlas in our intention and be consistent, not just for our sake, but to realize the impact this has on the ummah, and how the scholars of the past, within a short amount of time, changed the ummah, and changed the people to where they were able to change the condition of the oppressed within the ummah, within a very relatively short time. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us that same barakah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us leaders and great ulama like Imam Hasani and the great liberators of the deen like Salahuddin Ayyubi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all our shortcomings, make us people of ikhlas and sincerity, make us people who are not frivolous and filled with distractions. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل الدعاء، ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستهدفين في غزة وفي السودان وفي كل مكان يا رب العالمين. والله سبحانه وتعالى help all of our brothers and sisters all over the world that are struggling and are under a lot of oppression, and make us the ummah rise again on La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Allah ya'muru bil-'adli wal-ihsan wa ita'i dhil-qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal-munkar wal-baghi ya'idukum la'allakum tadhakkarun wa aqimus salat.